Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm here with Anthony again to talk about more of the Harry Potter universe and its intersection with astrology and whatnot. And today we're going to be doing the chart of Severus Snape, without a doubt, one of the most interesting, multi layered characters in the whole series for sure. So this is going to be fun, I think. And once again, Anthony figured out the chart and posted it on Facebook in his group, and I thought it fit pretty well when I first looked at it. So we'll explore it more and see what we can mine from it. But could you just explain how you figured out this particular chart while I share the screen?
Um, yeah. Well, I was more interested in the elemental makeup of the chart. So the time it wasn't really a rectified chart. I just thought, well, being the kind of person that Snape is, I'm much more likely to give him a very sort of nighttime chart. I also
Sure.
thought of a twilight chart, sort of because of the bat-like
And
persona here.
sure, yeah. Did you also get the date from Pottermore again, or where did you get the date?
I think I got it from Possible. Well, I'm pretty certain I did.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, wherever you got it, I think it works pretty well. And I think a night chart makes a lot of sense too, because night birth people are naturally, they can be more naturally like in the background or out of place in a lot of
Yeah,
ways, is what I've noticed. Not to say that a day birth person can't feel out of place and stuff either, but it's just that like a night birth is naturally a bit more introverted of a person. And these are kind of archetypes of a night birth person. They're
mm,
I don't know, it's hard to describe what I mean, but if you just think about it as like the fact that in a night chart Venus and Mars and Moon are more powerful, right? They're much more personal planets, whereas Sun, Saturn, and Jupiter in a day chart are emphasized. They're much more impersonal planets and bodies, right? So the night birth person is immediately more naturally more like personal, secretive, kind of, you know, not so not as focused on the sort of the social themes that Saturn and Jupiter bring. They relate to things more personally, at least in theory, right? So, but I think this fits very well for Snape because he is always, he's always also been kind of like we talked about with Hermione. He's always been kind of out of place in many respects, but especially, growing up and when he got to Hogwarts, he always, he just kind of has this kind of lurking in the background, lurking in the shadows kind of theme.
yeah, definitely. I think if you have like all the planets under the horizon, or majority of planets under the horizon,
Yeah.
certainly with other testimonies from the chart, we can start to deduce sort of picture from that. And it's interesting, the only planet of the chart here is the moon, and it's exalted in Taurus.
Yeah, and it's with Algol.
That's another thing I noticed about this chart is that both Venus and the Moon,
Moon.
but both
Venus
female
is on
planets,
Antares, right?
are Antares. So yeah, so two female planets on prominent fixed stars.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very interesting stuff. I was just looking at that. I actually got the some stuff on Antares up here, and
Mm.
as I was scanning it, I saw this also. It was also known as Lord of the Seed, Creator of Prosperity, the King, and the Lusty King. And this reminds me of how Snape nicknamed himself the Half-Blood Prince,
Yeah.
an allusion to, I guess, what his father's last name or something, or whichever parent was Muggle-born. One of his parents was Muggle-born, and so
I
um,
think it was
yeah,
his
so
mother. Yeah.
Prince was like his last name actually, but it's a double
It
on
was. It was.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a
Remember that.
double entendre thing where basically, it's the half blood prince, Eileen Prince, his mother,
Mm.
but it's also like Prince, as in kind of like him lifting himself up into royalty, kind of like Lord Voldemort did the same thing. You know, he made up that name. And
I think that's fantastic because also we could easily look into the mythology of Venus here because it's Venus that is conjunct Antares. Am I
it
correct?
is,
Yeah,
yeah, it is. And
and
his
Venus
love
here is
dies,
morning.
right?
Yeah,
Morning
Venus
star.
here is morning star, so it's Lucifer, the light bringer, the one who
Hmm.
enlightens. And so this conjunct Antares, we can see this sort of half-blood prince, this kind of, we can see him like building up this sort of persona in his youth, this sort of vanity
Yeah.
project that he could have had going on. I don't mean vanity in the sort of you know, model kind of way, but I mean as part of his insulation from the rest of other people, is that from his isolation he could have sort of bigged himself up.
Yeah, he's got this planet on a royal star, like right on it. So this royal theme, like you're saying. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too that Venus is also, well, Venus naturally signifies love and marriage, and it also rules the seventh house of the same, where we also find the exalted moon on Algol, and the woman he loved, was murdered, and he never was quite able to attain her either, right? So that's a big theme, I think, here for him that fits very well in this chart. But it's also the 12th Lord, and we find some commentary on it here. um, Potential for great power, extremes of good fortune, malevolence, right? According to Lily, it discerns many honors if the native be careful and be not deceived by soldiers. It doth many times produce a burning fever or some violent act and prejudice the right eye. So it's, and it has this theme of like power and self-destruction. Again, these Scorpio themes, because it's the heart of the Scorpion. And this, this couples it with the moon on Algol, the star of, the star of the demon's head or Medusa's head, which if you gaze into it, it turns you to stone. So I mean, Snape was very attracted to power, like most of his life, because he had an abusive family life. From what I understand, I think his father was fairly abusive, and we can see that in this Saturn Sun conjunction for
Fixed
sure.
stars can work in many ways depending on the person. So it could literally be the moon here being our mental capacity on alcohol. It could mean, it could sort of, what's that? Oh, I forgot the word I was going to use. Sort of anguish of the mind.
An anguish of the mind, sure.
Yeah, losing your head in an emotional way, concerned with whatever the moon signifies. Or it could mean, it's very martial star, it could mean sort of taking the sword and wielding the sword to your advantage, or the sword is going to fall upon your own head.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so this, you can take the story of the fixed star in any way that your life.
Yeah, and Snape's life is very tragic. I was really saddened and moved at the end of the series when he's killed, and when Harry receives the pensieve from him and finds out what what was really going on. Like it actually really, like, I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. It really it really made me kind of sad. And this is a fairly tragic chart in many respects. I mean, Saturn's sun, moon on Algol, lot of fortune in the eighth house, opposing a fairly malefic Mars. Mars is, even though it has sect, it's in, I guess it's in its own bound, or maybe it's moving in, or maybe it's just at the end of Saturn's bound. But it's a fairly malefic Mars there in many ways. But and it rules the sixth house too, so it's doubly Martian. But it also rules the first house, so we do see that a lot of the tragedy of Snape's life comes through his own actions, right? He chooses to become a Death Eater. He chooses to betray Lily and James, right? By outing them to Lord Voldemort, right? He's the one that tells him where they are, or something like that. I can't remember the exact details, but
I don't think he tells him where
he
Lily.
he listens he listens in he listens to Dumbledore conversing with Madam whatever her name is, the divination teacher, who
Yeah.
has that
Oh,
prophetic moment in that pub in that the
that's
wizarding town.
right.
He listens
Yeah.
into that, and then he reports it. He reports the information he received to Voldemort. It was only a piece of the prophecy. It wasn't the whole thing. And somehow that is one of the things that leads to Lily and James's death. And so after that happens, Snape is like really horrified because he really didn't think Voldemort would kill Lily, right? Because he didn't like James. He hated James, arguably, but
Hmm.
he loved Lily, and he didn't really want any harm to come to either of them. But in his sort of ambition for power, he lost sight of his judgment, and so he's Mars. Mars rules his rising sign, and it's even in the bounds of Mars, so it's very Mars. Scorpio. I mean, Scorpio fits him so well. I mean, he just embodies that
Yeah.
so well in many respects. But it's interesting how he has 3 planets in Sagittarius, which kind of is a metaphor for, like I said in a previous video we did about the houses in Hogwarts and the signs, like that Snape is kind of like this person who comes out of the darkness symbolized by Scorpio. He does reform his ways and he becomes like a double agent. He becomes a trusted ally to Dumbledore and a protector of Harry Potter, even though it seems like he's like the worst person ever for like all 7 books up until the very end when you really realize what's happening. So
Yeah. Though I think by the maybe third, I think I start thinking, there's more to Snape than meets the eye. He's more than this
yeah,
sort of pantomime villain.
there are
He's,
hints, there are clues and whatnot, and so I also suspected that for a while of like, okay, who is Snape's allegiance really to? What's really going on here? And so yeah, we find that to be something that's that comes to light later on.
But I think something else, when I posted this chart on the group, I was looking at the sort of elemental makeup of the chart, and I was noticing how there's very little, there's no moisture at all. There's no planet in any
There's
moist
no
sign,
water, yeah, okay,
no
or even
water,
air.
and
Wow.
yeah, and dealing with the grief of losing the other character. He would have needed an outlet,
Yeah.
which was at least moisture. That moisture sort of channel it in some way. And I said in the group that one way of doing this was by becoming potions master. But we also see he was also very good at potions in his youth, because the whole point of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is that Harry gets this book and he realizes just how good this Half-Blood Prince was at potion making. So he
Yeah.
always had that ability. So we always see the underlying nature of someone, which can be seen in the elemental makeup, and there are different ways of doing it, by sign or by another way, which I won't
Sure.
go into in this video. But sort of wanting what they are not. They're not looking for more of what they already are. So if someone is very, very dry, they're not going to be looking for something that's very, very dry. At least if they're healthy, they won't be doing that.
Right, and then we also
Yeah.
find that he doesn't have any air signs, so that can have to do with like friendship and sociability, and he's got the head of the dragon in the 11th house here, so he ends up associating with some power hungry friends. The head of the dragon is very power
Yeah.
hungry.
I see.
And I also think it's fascinating that Mars is almost exactly square to the nodal axis, and that's him, right? Lord 1, and it's Lord 6 too. So again, we kind of have this theme of treachery, this theme of power seeking,
That's
heavily
interesting.
emphasized. But I also wanted to point out too, I originally said that this is the lot of fortune, and technically it is according to one methodology,
Yeah.
um, but according to another methodology where you don't reverse the calculation, actually this would be the lot of fortune and this would be the lot of spirit. And I think either way works. I think that if we take this as the lot of spirit, which is my preference at this point in time in my practice, it fits very well with potions making because it's in the 8th house, which again has to do with potions and chemistry are a very eighth house thing because you're combining elements together to produce some sort of hidden effect or power. And having it in Gemini too, this is a sign of experimentation and whatnot. But having the lot of fortune in a water sign, along with this south node here later on, this also is like
Right.
naturally gifted at something watery, right? Potions.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. And
I'd
he's
also,
yeah, go ahead.
um, I'm going to come on to that. But if you see, we have a very strong Saturn here, and
Yeah.
by antition, I think what degree is Saturn on here?
It's about 10 degrees.
So it's conjunct by antition. It's conjunct Jupiter by antition,
Yeah, it
and
would be.
Jupiter rules the second houses, sort of our resources.
Resources.
What goes into our mouths,
Yeah.
potions, ruling this, and it's like conjunct. So this Jupiter is very close to this Saturn as well, and then we have Venus conjunct the second house cusp, close to that second house cusp. So we do have an emphasis there on potions as well, I suppose. But I suppose definitely we'd have to definitely consider, like you said, the lot of fortune, because the lot of fortune is a bit like a super moon. This is John Frawley's terminology.
Yeah, I like how he says that. Yeah,
it's a sort of the hungering for something in that life, and so obviously we'd have to look at that as well.
Yeah, definitely. The moon is appetites and hungers and things, and I find that the lot of fortune is like also naturally something that just brings us happiness. It's just like a simple day-to-day kind of happiness, whereas the lot of spirit is kind of this hidden intentions of like finding ultimate happiness or seeking something, not so much happiness for yourself, but seeking something because you just have to seek it because it touches your heart. The sun and a lot of spirit refer to the heart naturally because spirit is like a super sun. So we do see that his intentions and the way he relates to, you could say, God as well, with a lot of spirit. It's happening in the eighth house here, opposing Mars, and Mercury, the Lord itself, is in the eighth place from the lot of fortune, re-emphasizing an eighth house theme, and it's with the prenatal lunation and Saturn. So again, these are like hidden, like deeply rooted sort of themes, drawing power from something hidden and deeper and whatnot. And oh boy, oh yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to point out real quick is that arguably, we might say Jupiter is Lord of the geniture, but I really think it's the moon. Wouldn't you agree? What do you think?
Yeah.
Could be Saturn, but moon is angular, Moon is the most elevated, so
I'd give it to moon, definitely. Yeah.
It's also the sect light, right? It's a night chart, so this is like a very, it's a very powerful moon.
So it's choleric phase as well, so it's a kind of wants action. It's going to want action on behalf of the earth element.
But it's always frustrated though in that action because it's in the bounds of Saturn and in a melancholic sign, right? So it's never quite.
Yeah.
It's also in aversion to both benefics, right? So it's only witnessing Saturn and the sun is not a malefic per se, but it's kind of cruel because it burns things. And Mercury is arguably a malefic here because he's with Saturn. So,
and they don't like them, and they don't like the moon at all.
Right, they don't really like the moon because they're in the moon's detriment, and so it's kind of it's a strange chart, but I don't think we would expect anything else for somebody like Snape, who was very much at war with himself most of his life and had a very hard time feeling loved. I mean, Venus on Antares is not an easy thing. Even though it has a strong ruler and stuff, it's also the 12th Lord. The 12th Lord, when the planet is associated with the 12th and the 7th, it can bring a lot of frustrations and letdowns and sacrifice because of love. And we find as well Venus squaring the lot of fortune in the fifth, and also with its lord Jupiter, right? This is in a sense this theme of children, which comes through in Snape becoming sort of like a kind of like a surrogate behind the scenes father to Harry. You know, I mean, Sirius Black is really Harry's sort of surrogate father, but Sirius is more like a friend to Harry.
Yeah.
And Snape is like secretly his kind of guardian father figure. It's really odd. You know, he's always disciplining him. He's always
Yeah.
looking out for him. Like he's much more of a father figure to him, I think, than Sirius really is, which is fine.
He's
Sirius is not a father figure. You know, that's not Sirius, but
he, Sirius Black has a Saturnian name, you could say.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Black, you know.
Yeah, Sirius Black.
Yeah, but you could definitely have Snape. Snape is Saturn. You know, he just
In
looks
many
like,
ways, yeah.
yeah, in the dungeons, black hair, black cape,
Yeah.
strict, severe. You know, all this, and he's also turns out to be a Saturnian kind of hero. He's not a sun kind of hero.
No, no, he's behind the scenes.
Yeah.
He's bearing a really he's carrying a great burden, a great weight
Mm.
that really has very little to no redemption publicly. You know, I mean, the only reason that he's redeemed is because he's able to give Harry that pensieve stuff before he dies. Otherwise, no one would have ever known of Snape's sacrifice because Dumbledore was dead, and who would have known? It was just between him and Dumbledore.
Mm.
So
And those tears were very precious because Snape wasn't the person to be seen crying in public, was he?
no,
Especially to Harry.
to Harry, yeah, and
Yeah,
he grabs Harry and he's like, look at me," and
yeah.
you know he cries out he cries it out, right? He's crying out the pensieve, or is he just crying?
He cries, and then Harry gets it with her.
Yeah, yeah, but it's almost
Yeah,
like you almost wonder too if like even it's I don't know, it's kind of a mystery, right? Like even if Snape didn't have that pensieve hidden in him magically to give to Harry, like it's almost like he wants to look into Harry's eyes before he dies more for more to communicate something that like, you know, like I actually secretly was always looking out for you, or even like secretly loved you, because this is the child of his great love who he could never have. So as much as he does kind of despise Harry because it's James's son and because he reminds him of James, he kind of, I think he loves him too. I just don't think you would go out of your way like that if you
I
didn't
don't.
have
Yeah,
great love, you know? So it's again this Venus Antares thing happening. 12th Lord, it's great sacrifice, you know, and it's aspecting a lot of fortune in the fifth. Exactly.
mm,
And it's with the Lord of that fifth house fortune, Jupiter, you know. So it's a very yeah, it's a very conflicted character, a very touching ending where he wants to look into Harry's eyes, you know. And I think it's about more than just the pensieve, but maybe I'm just romanticizing it. I guess we'll never know, right?
I guess not. Though I would say that he would have, knowing his character. Well, I think I know his character. That I think he'd have a hard time in actually saying yes. I love Harry.
No,
In
he
that
couldn't
way,
say it. I don't think he could
you
say
know.
it. It's a Saturnic love, though, right? It's not a deeply personal love.
Well, exactly, yeah. And is Saturn is stronger. It's a dignified planet, so it's the
It is.
good side of that Saturn.
Yeah, and
Um,
that Saturn is also it's in a phasis, which means that 7 days prior or after the birth, it's coming out of the rays of the sun, right? So that Saturn
yeah,
becomes quite important actually, and it's a little, you know, it's a little malefic too because it's contrary to sect, but you know, it's a Saturn that's been purified, so it's a lead that's been turned into gold, right? He goes from being this very selfish individual to being this really noble, self-sacrificial individual, and the sun is the 10th lord, so you know this is like the greatest thing he has to do in his life, in a sense, is this kind of below the horizon, behind the scenes sacrifice, you might say. And it's also fourth, Saturn ruling the fourth and third and being in the third. This is actually, this can be a very mystical kind of signature in a chart, because the third house has a lot to do with like the private side of religion and faith. And the fourth house is very much a house of mysticism and secrets and what's buried and so on. So
buried treasure.
Buried treasure, yeah.
And another thing that interested me, this idea that he was good at blocking people from reading his mind.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's a really important skill to have when you're being a double agent in the wizarding world, in a magical world, It's definitely a good skill to have.
Without a doubt.
I was thinking, with no air in his makeup, there was really nothing for an enemy to access.
And no emotion either. There's very little emotion in Snape. It's all kind of rigidly controlled. It only comes out as Venus and the moon, which are conjunct these very powerful but malefic fixed stars, right? So it is very controlled, but also sort of suppressed in a way, or conflicted. But yeah, I mean, he does have a strong Mercury there. I think possibly, well, it might be in the Jupiter bounds. I'm not sure. It's hard to tell here, and I'm too lazy to look it up. But it's with this really strong Saturn, and like I've talked about in other videos, Saturn Mercury creates a really powerful mind for like logic and reason, which is cold and aloof and removed, and just sees things as they are. So it can be a very brilliant mind, and that might add to his ability to be very good at occlumency. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so.
Occlumency, which is the mind reading, and also barring your mind from other people. But he also has a lot of spirit in the eighth, in an air sign. So this could be the ability to really hide his true thoughts and intentions. A lot of spirit very much has to do with intentions, and even like how you think about things, how you perceive things. So
it's the light of day, isn't it? It's seeing something as it is.
Yeah.
The revelation almost of like when Mars and Venus are caught in a tangle together in a famous painting, I think it is.
Yeah, sure.
And it's the sun who finds them, because the sun is the only one who can shine a light on it.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. That myth, right? That's funny.
I forgot the name of the myth. I remember reading about it.
You're talking about the one where Aphrodite is having an affair with Ares?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. And then Hephaesto catches them or whatever.
Yeah. Like playing the role of the sun there.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And Hephaesto, or Vulcan, is a very solar archetype. And even some people theorize that there's an intramercurial planet called Vulcan that's so close to the sun that we can't see it. So who knows, right? But yes, Vulcan, Hephaesto, he works with fire to forge things. So yeah, that's an interesting theme. I also wanted to point out real quick too that like Snape, we find out that Snape was an extremely brilliant student, like you're talking about in in book 6. We find that out through the Half-Blood Prince reveal and whatnot, and we find that his ninth Lord Moon is extremely powerful, well placed, and we also find again that even his third Lord is very well placed, and with Mercury as well. So these things kind of just add to him being a very brilliant student. So I just wanted to point that out, because I think that the chart, it makes sense with the chart.
Yeah.
But there's also I think there's a weak self-confidence factor in certain respects, because we've got the South Node in the 5th house and the Sun with Saturn. So Snape was like bullied and made fun of, and people didn't really like him. And, he had great ability and whatnot, but he kind of ends up becoming like rather jaded and miserly and sort of arguably, maybe he never really totally felt confident in the healthiest way, because that's why he joined Voldemort, but that's also why he vied for the Defense Against the Dark Arts position, for a long time. That's what he wanted.
Yeah, he
He
really
always
wanted
wanted
that.
this respect, and he wanted this prestige and stuff, because he never really felt like he had it with these kind of factors going on.
Yeah. Trying to think. If you look at the Mercury here, this is behind the sun, so it's very melancholic Mercury,
Melancholic, yeah.
and we have a melancholic moon. Well, it's a choleric moon, but the fact that it's in a melancholic sign,
Sure.
one of the ways that is Mercury and Moon can get along is by being melancholic, by having that same earthy objective. And if we don't know the temperament of someone, then the next best place to look, I would say, is with the Moon and Mercury, because this is where we know the sort of mental capacity, and we know what this nature wants, or how it is gonna manifest.
Sure.
And that makes sense, because Snape doesn't come over like the cheerful sanguine, the cheerful airy person.
Sure.
So there's in a lot of these character charts, there's a lot of things that says, I can see the potential by the planets being where they are and by these different aspects, and you can see how it works. And it's just quite amazing, really.
Yeah. Agreed. And like, like you're saying, what is their agenda and whatnot? Like the moon is, arguably in the detriment of Mars, right? So on some level, he doesn't like himself because Mars is his first lord and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we have the moon, which brings down Mars, and Mercury, which exalts Mars. So
Yeah.
there's a conflict here between Mars.
Right. Right.
And so if he is Lord One, Mars is Lord One, that could easily reflect the idea of going between the good side and the dark side, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Because Mercury and the moon here have different likes, if you will.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the chart with the trans-Saturnian planets here added in. We find we've got Neptune rising fairly close to the ascendant, Uranus fairly close to the midheaven, and then Pluto square Venus. So re-emphasizing that Antares theme that we've already talked about. Uranus trying to Jupiter, but square the moon. I think that's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
So go on, you talk about them.
I'm not sure what Uranus square the moon might refer to, other than it could just be sort of, again, tuning us into that algal theme again in another way, like.
See, I don't do aspects to the outer planets. I only do it by conjunction.
Interesting. Oh, just by conjunction. Okay, that's interesting. And opposition. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why. But
it's a little easier, I think, to do it that way. But I have found that at least the squares, and sometimes I use semi-squares and sesquiquadrates, especially since I studied Uranian astrology, which is actually one of the most accurate predictive methods of astrology. Believe it or not. Yeah, it's all based on classical principles, but it's very different because there's no zodiac signs or houses.
Right.
But yeah, I do find that these squares and semi-squares and things can really make a big difference. So I mean, Uranus square the moon, you just think about how the two come together. And for somebody like Snape, I mean, it makes him, I think, very outside the box, just to use a generic Uranus keyword. It makes him a lot more I don't know, truly kind of a strange guy. It's like, I'm not coming up with the best
Yeah,
insight here. Admittedly, at the moment, it's not speaking to me as loudly as some other things are, but I think that it would make sense on some level too. With it could also pertain to his mother, Eileen Prince. It could tell us something about his mother, and again, I cannot remember if it was his mother or his father who was the Muggle.
yeah, I'm the same. I
I
can't
think it
remember.
was his mother actually, because I think that's why I don't know. I think that's why he chose the name like the Half Blood Prince thing, because it's like a reference to his mother or something. Like because it could have been that his father. It's like his father would. I'm gonna have to look it up. I have to look it up. This is driving me nuts now. Okay, no. So Snape's mother was the witch. Okay, and his father. So it's wow. So what he takes his father's name because that's what's standard, right? But it's really his mother who
Yeah,
gives
that's
him the
interesting.
magic, right? So his mother here is the magical one, right? We don't find anything magical about Sun Saturn. We find that
I
they're in simple, boring old Capricorn. So there you go, and it's interesting too because his father was, I believe, abusive and his mother was not, or whatever. So there's
no
the
Mars is exalted in Capricorn, so it's not that boring.
wait, what's exalted in Capricorn?
Mars is action and desire, and
Yeah, but
Mars is
Mars,
quite exciting.
yeah, but Mars is in Sag. Mars is in Sag.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I know. I just thought you was making a statement about Capricorn.
No, no, no. I just mean like kind of as a joke, like in this context, it's like,
Oh,
his
right.
father
Yeah.
is Saturn or the sun, depending on how you look at it. But I think it's more Saturn because it's a night chart and Saturn rules the fourth, right? So
Yeah, definitely.
a
Yeah.
pretty standard kind of average signification. But his mother, right? His mother as the moon is on Algol, exalted, and aspected by Uranus. So this is definitely, I think, a reference to kind of his split nature too, of like being half blood, being a part, not a pure blooded wizard. This kind of would be something that would aggravate him and did aggravate him and caused him a lot of confusion and strife. And Uranus is in a sense, a very dualistic archetype. Not, or I shouldn't say dualistic, right? But it cleaves things, right? Because of that whole story, if we relate it to Uranus, the sky god, right? He's like
Yeah.
some part of him is cleaved off and or cleaved, or I don't remember. I forget. I always forget whose testicles produce Venus. Is it Uranus or
Yeah.
it is? Okay,
I
yeah.
think
So
so. Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, or it's Kronos who takes his place, the place of I don't remember exactly, but yeah, there is this kind of aspect of like cleaving to the Uranus myth, and Uranus itself does punch holes in what we know. It punches these holes and makes things sort of illogical and elusive. And but Neptune rising here, I mean, great for potions. You know, especially being in a water sign and whatnot. I just think that's great for potions, and I think that even the Pluto square Venus in the second, that could also be great for potions as well.
But there's a lot of potions which are very Neptunian in influence. So
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just watery nature as well, isn't it? In a
Yep.
water sign. So
Yep. Definitely. Cool. Well, I think that does it for me. Did you want to say anything else?
no, I've said everything. I've said more than I could have said.
Sure.
um, I'm sure you could spend a lifetime on these charts and
Oh yeah, you
still,
could. And
yeah.
before we made the video, I was looking at Harry's chart to see some of the synastry, but I think that will require a separate video. But just real quick, as a teaser, I'll point out that Harry's moon is exactly on Snape's south node. Very interesting stuff. So
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I don't
it's
think I'd like. I don't think I'd like to spend a lifetime on Snape's chart though. So.
okay. Yeah, I don't think we will. We'll leave it
No.
at that. And cool. So thanks again for joining me. This has been really fun. For all of you folks watching and enjoying the series, please don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And also, reach out to us on Facebook. And please check out some of the links I'm going to post as well in the description of the video below about my website, my Patreon, my blog, and whatnot. And otherwise, stay tuned for the next in the series to be decided. All right.
Yes. Can't wait.
Cool. All right. See you later, man.
See ya.